Hi, my name is Leonardo and welcome to the final episode of History with los Salchipulpos. Africa sure is a unique continent, but how did it become what it is now? Today, in this last episode of History with los Salchipulpos, we will take a look at Africa in the 19th century. Want to learn about African history? Neither do I, but anyways, we will have to talk about it. To first understand Africa in the 19th century, we have to take a brief look into its background. First of all, in the 1500s, European powers wanted to expand. So they did by starting its missions to colonize the Americas and Africa. In Africa, their purpose was to take slaves so they can do the hard labor. But all of this started to change in the 19th century.
So now we're going to talk about the government of Africa in the 19th century. For 400 years, Africa was already settled by European power, but they only lived for the coast. But in the 19th century, imperialism grew in Europe. European nations began to colonize Africa. The African tribes put resistance, but they were defeated, mostly because of the use of new technology, such as the machine gun, which helped a lot to Europeans to conquer and crush the tribes of the Africans, which they couldn't resist anymore. The great technological advantage of the enemy was very big. For the next years, the European colonies in Africa established their own government, being a bad government. First, because they didn't care about the people. All the Africans were slaves. They only were their interest in African territory because of the extract of raw materials and imperialism. Some European countries used it to settle as a new home for them, ruled by Europeans and kicking out all the natives of Africa. As a curious fact, the colony that had more power, in this case guns, were the best one of other colonies. So for this, European countries sent more guns to their colonies in Africa. Also, the only colony or part of Africa that wasn't colonized was Ethiopia. It wasn't until the 20th century when finally Africa led to their independence from European countries. But this led horrible consequences that today Africa still lives.
The base economy of Africa was the agriculture gave a lot of work to the Africans. But the Africans didn't fight for the minerals, so countries like Great Britain take the minerals and exploit the Africans. So this way, the native African people work harder to make other countries rich and they don't receive anything.
Europeans had tried to conquer Africa many times before the 19th century, but African diseases and resistance from its people had prevented them from achieving their goals. Anyway, in the 19th century, industrialization gave European new technologies, weapons and medicines to fight the Africans. New advantages, Europeans could finally defeat the Africans. The powers began to colonize every land they could discover in Africa, but this sparked many conflicts between the European nations. One of them was the dispute over the Congo River basin between Portugal and Britain with one side and France in the other. The Portuguese were the only power to have control of this region since the 15th century. But in the 1870s, the French began to claim another region of the river. This led to conflicts between the Portuguese and the French. The Portuguese decided to ally with Great Britain, one of the French greatest rivals. Tensions began to arise between both sides. Seeing this, Germany's Prime Minister Otto von Bismarck decided to organize a conference where all powers could meet to decide what would happen in Africa. This took place in 1884 and was named the Berlin Conference. Almost every European nation assisted to the conference, which took place from 1884 to 1885. At the end, the Berlin Act was established. It determined that the Congo River could be neutral between all the European nations. It also gave the region of the Congo to Belgium, a new country. Besides, it decreased tensions between the French with the Portuguese and the British. At the end, it also determined how the European nations could claim a new colony in Africa. The biggest loser from the conference was, without doubt, the Africans, which were not even invited to the conference at first place. Besides the Africans, the Portuguese lost many of its territories in the continent, which caused them to be the greatest loser from Europe. The greatest winner from this conference were the Germans, who, besides gaining prestige, gained new territories and also achieved to create conflicts between the British and the French.
Another big conflict that Africa had was the slave trade, which supposedly ended in the 19th centuries when countries from Europe like Sweden, France, and the most important, Great Britain, abolished slavery. Countries were influenced mainly by the aftermath caused by the French Revolution and also because the religion didn't accept the slave trade. An important factor of these countries abolishing slavery was that when Great Britain abolished it, it would have ships all over Africa to make this slave trade. So when it abolished, the slave trade lowered significantly.
First know what was the culture and religion like in the 19th century in Africa, we'll have to take a look back before it. For example, in 1591, the Moroccan occupation of tribes or little empires in the northern parts of Africa, such as Ghana, meant the end of them. And little by little, pushed them out of their territory by the 18th century. These tribes that were occupied by the Moroccans meant that they would be affected by the Western African Islam. One example of this tribe affected was the Kuran tribe. This new Kunta tribe had completely dominated the salt trade by the 18th century. And at the start of the 19th century, Sidi Mukhtar, the leader of that tribe, had produced a great spiritualism among the Muslims of Western Africa. So in the 19th century, the Qadiriyya and the Tajiniyya began to develop due to groups of devout Muslims who wanted to work for a true Islamic society. This came with a cost, as all of those who did not practice Islam began to be intolerated by the Muslims, and as such, war was created. This new Islam doctrine became attractive to the Fulanis. The Fulanis were Western African tribes that were scattered throughout the savannah in different agricultural settlements. These Fulani tribes became angry with the rulers. So, when the Muslim influence came to Africa, they allied with the Muslims to overthrow their rulers and as such created the Islam Revolution in Western Africa.
To conclude, the 19th century was a complete disaster for Africa. At the end of it, most of the continent was colonized or about to be colonized by European powers. The 19th century caused Africa to be so underdeveloped. This can still be seen today.